Welcome to Yes Boss, presented by Anagha Saju. Dr. Bose, it is very well known that you are a veteran civil servant of the Indian Administrative Service who was hailed by the Prime Minister as a man of ideas. You are a very silent but strong presence in Delhi's decision-making forums. Recently, Rahul Gandhi is on record that there is a pernicious trend at centralization of power in India. What are the powers of the Prime Minister? Can the Prime Minister be dictatorial in a democratic setup? Is there a downslide from the Nehruvian days as far as the role perception of the Prime Minister is concerned?
Well, Jawaharlal Nehru's cabinet was in session. The topic taken up for discussion was the Nehru-Liaquat Ali Pact, under which refugees from Pakistan were permitted to return unhindered for the disposal of their properties. The discussion was heated, especially because there was no convergence of views between Jawaharlal Nehru and Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. When the debate turned loudly argumentative, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel quietly left the cabinet room. Nehru and Mukherjee continued their impassioned arguments, fearing that something untoward might happen. Their colleagues managed to persuade the two belligerents to postpone the discussion for another day. This was described by N.V. Gadgil, a minister in the Nehru cabinet, in his book Government from Inside. Shyam Prasad Mukherjee subsequently resigned from the Nehru cabinet. In a democracy, difference of opinion between the Prime Minister and his ministerial colleagues is not something rare. You know, our parliamentary democratic system is modeled after Britain. Instances are many in that country of undermining the basic democratic concept of collective responsibility of the cabinet. It is not uncommon in Britain to see a quirky style of parliamentary democracy with the ministers wholeheartedly ratifying government decisions in the cabinet and then going out to vehemently criticize it in public.
Sir, Nehru is pictured by some people as dictatorial in his approach to the cabinet. How far do you endorse in this view?
Well, it cannot be said that Nehru was authoritarian or dictatorial. Of course, he believed that the Prime Minister was not just one among equals. Often, he had been described as a banyan tree. But Nehru's style of doing things as he pleased had come in for covert and overt criticism from his colleagues many a times. Nehru never considered it necessary to discuss with his ministerial colleagues on any matter relating to foreign affairs, his most favorite subject. Initially, the cabinet was informed of the appointments of ambassadors, but its ratification was not sought. On one occasion, a meeting of the cabinet was at its fag end when he informed it of the appointment of Sir Mirza Muhammad Ismail, the former Diwan, as an ambassador. When N.V. Gadgil asked him if he was merely informing the cabinet or placing it before it for discussion, Nehru was obviously annoyed. After the cabinet, he mentioned this to Patel. But Patel did not mince words while expressing his strong reservations against the appointment. Though Nehru resigned the appointment, he stopped the practice altogether of informing the cabinet of such decisions. Till Patel's death, Nehru used to seek his opinion on most matters. Patel was usually silent in the cabinet meetings. His style was to privately talk to the Prime Minister before and after the cabinet meetings. Those privy to inside goings on had said that after Patel's death, cabinet meetings more or less had become Nehru darbars.
Do you think strong ministers like Sardar Patel also succumbed to the authoritarian attitude of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru?
History shows that even a charismatic Prime Minister like Jawaharlal Nehru could not control the cabinet in keeping with his views all the time. Ministers were also not rare who accused the Prime Minister of being dictatorial. In 1948, Sardar Patel resorted to police action in Hyderabad, ignoring Nehru's reservations. Similarly, Rafi Ahmad Kidwai's action in giving refuge in India for Nepal King Dribhuvan, who went against the wishes of Nehru. The arrest of Kashmir Premier Sheikh Abdullah was also shown by historical records as Kidwai's decision behind Nehru's back. The powerful Prime Minister could only silently put up with such incursions or actions by his colleagues behind his back.
Does the Prime Minister enjoy full freedom to select who should be his cabinet colleagues?
Yes and no. In theory, the Prime Minister is to decide who all should be in his cabinet. But in practice, the case is different. How free the Prime Minister is in the exercise of his power depends on two factors. One, the position of the Prime Minister in the party. Second, the position of the party in the Parliament. Was any Prime Minister ever able to pick and choose his ministers as he deemed fit? The answer is no. When we look at the functioning of the parliamentary system in various countries, including India and Britain, even Nehru did not have the complete power to choose his ministers. The influence of Patel in government formation was clearly evident. K. M. Munshi, R. R. Divakar, Shanmugam Chetty, C. D. Deshmukh, N. V. Gadgil, and C. H. Bawa. They were considered to be Patel's nominees in the cabinet. Moreover, Vijayalakshmi Pandit and T. T. Krishnamachari were kept out of the cabinet in view of objections by Patel. A similar situation cropped up in 1964 and then in 67. Morarji Desai had become a force to reckon with in Indian politics. Lal Bahadur Shastri, who became Prime Minister after Nehru's death, had to accommodate in his ministry 13 senior ministers and 15 ministers of state from the previous dispensation. Though it was after ignoring Morarji Desai's claims that Lal Bahadur Shastri was made the Prime Minister, Morarji himself had to be selected to the cabinet of Shastri. On his own, Shastriji selected only three persons for his cabinet. They were newcomers, S.K. Patil, Sanjeev Reddy and Indira Gandhi. However, Shastri ensured that allocation of portfolios was fully his prerogative. It was Shastri's personal decision that so Sardar Swaran Singh as foreign minister. When a colleague chose to question this, Shastri emphatically told him it was his prerogative.
Were the Prime Ministers who succeeded Lal Bahadur Shastri first among equals or one among equals in the cabinet?
It was Indira Gandhi who succeeded Shastri as Prime Minister. She was certainly very strong Prime Minister, but even she did not have the absolute power to pick and choose her ministers. She was forced to induct Sachindra Chowdhury and Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed into the cabinet in place of her choices, Ashok Sen and Humayun Kabir. This was presumed to be under pressure from Adilya Ghosh, Gulzarlal Nanda and Jagjeevan Ram. When Morarji Desai of the Janata Party became Prime Minister, he was in fact heading a coalition government. Obviously, the Prime Minister did not enjoy the privilege or prerogative of choosing his ministers. It was for the parties in the coalition to decide who should represent them in the ministry. Desai was willing to accept Jagjeevan Ram and Charan Singh as deputy prime ministers, but the two senior leaders insisted on only one post of deputy prime minister. The situation was no different when Charan Singh became prime minister. Y.V. Chavan, Congress nominee, was deputy prime minister. The Congress further decided its other representatives in the cabinet. Similarly, All India Anna DMK chose its nominees in the cabinet. In all such instances, even the concept of the Prime Minister as the first among equals received a beating. In coalitions, the position of the Prime Minister was lowered to one among equals. This is not a phenomenon confined to India. In the 1977 ministry, Charan Singh insisted on getting the home portfolio, and the Prime Minister had to succumb to his demand. In the following year, when Charan Singh returned to become Deputy Prime Minister, he was given the freedom to choose any portfolio other than home. At the practical level, it is not possible for the Prime Minister to fully utilize his power for the allocation of portfolios. In 1962, Nehru was personally inclined to allot the finance portfolio to T.T. Krishnamachari, but he had to yield to pressure from Morarji Desai. In 1963, S.K. Patil successfully thwarted a move by the Prime Minister for a change of his portfolio. In 1966, Indira Gandhi was interested in changing the portfolios of Gulzarlal Nanda and Sachindra Chowdhury, but withdrew from the move because of pressure from Kamraj, Adilya Ghosh and Hitendra Desai. Later, Indira Gandhi succeeded in establishing her unchallenged supremacy in the party and the government. She could fully implement her decision to change the portfolios of Y.B. Chavan, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed and Dinesh Singh. When the powerful Chavan expressed his reservation against the change, he was bluntly told to keep out of the cabinet if he had any reservations.
Does the concept of collective responsibility bind a minister to a decision even if he does not subscribe to it personally?
See, according to Article 74(2) of the Constitution, ministers continue in their position subject to the pleasure of the President of India. The pleasure of the President of India is in fact the decision of the Prime Minister conveyed to him. Ministers sometimes get into difficulties when this concept coalesces with the concept of collective responsibility. It is possible that the cabinet takes a decision that a minister may not personally approve, even if it is against his conscience.
What are the options before the Prime Minister if his cabinet colleague decides to consistently defy him?
A Prime Minister has two options if he feels that a minister should be dropped from his council. He can either demand his resignation or dismiss him. In 1963, Nehru resorted to a novel method to see that some inconvenient ministers were dropped. Through the good offices of the party chief K. Kamraj, a plan named Kamraj Plan was put forward to get senior ministers in the government to build up the party. Taking recourse to this clever plan, Nehru managed to get rid of senior ministers like Morarji Desai, Jagjeevan Ram, S.K. Patil, Lal Bahadur Shastri, A. Gopala Reddy, and K.N. Srimali, and some Congress chief ministers as well. His daughter Indira Gandhi was slightly different in her approach. While she asked Swaran Singh, Umashankar Dikshit, Sher Singh to submit their resignations, she recommended to the President dismissal of Mohan Dharia. Morarji Desai had sought the ratification of the cabinet for the removal of Charan Singh and Raj Narayan. Winston Churchill had said that if a Prime Minister had to succeed, he should not hesitate to become a butcher. As and when required, he should be prepared to throw out ministers.
What are the remedies available if a minister refuses to resign at the behest of the Prime Minister or a Chief Minister?
There may be occasions when a minister refuses to resign when asked for by the Prime Minister to do so. In such a situation, what is the course open to him? That is the question. Though not many instances are there at the center, there are several such instances in the states. Rao Birendra Singh in Haryana in 1961, a few Congress ministers in UP in 1970, Mr. Sangyan in Himachal Pradesh in 72, Mrs. Chandramati in Haryana in 1972 again, and Satyavani Muthu in nearby Tamil Nadu in 1974. These are ministers who refused to quit when called upon to do so. In such situations, a chief minister had two options before him or her: submit his own resignation and then reconstitute the ministry, or recommend to the governor to dismiss the ministers refusing to quit. Both these options had been utilized in different times in different states. The Prime Minister also could make use of these two options. The President is bound to accept the Prime Minister's recommendation for the dismissal of a minister. But there are exceptions. According to constitutional experts, if the Prime Minister's party is a minority in the ruling coalition, the President is not bound to act on such a recommendation. This is an opinion. If a powerful leader of a powerful party becomes Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's voice will become the voice of the Cabinet. And his decisions would become Cabinet decisions also. In the Indira Gandhi government, initially there were open discussions in the Cabinet. But in due course of time, it was said that the Cabinet took decisions as per her whims and fancies. In the case of the emergency, the Cabinet came to know of it after the declaration was made. There is neither law or precedent to assess rights and wrongs in such matters. It depends on how one views the impugned action in retrospect. If it is seen as reasonable, it is right, and if it is not justified, it may be construed as the Prime Minister acting on his or her whims. These are all matters of opinion.
Who discharges the functions of the Prime Minister when he is away from the country, and how do we measure the strength of a Prime Minister?
The Minister who presides over the Cabinet in the absence of the Prime Minister is generally considered as a number 2 in the Cabinet. However, there have been concerted moves by the Prime Ministers to see that all ministers were treated equally and that no one gained an upper hand. During Indira Gandhi's foreign tours, ministers presided over the Cabinet meetings in rotation, in alphabetical order. In this way, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed presided over a Cabinet meeting. Y.B. Chavan and Jagjeevan Ram could not get that opportunity. There was once a remark by a wag that Indira Gandhi even thought of inducting some junior ministers whose names began with the letter A or B, just to avoid some others from chairing the Cabinet. And now the second part of the question. How do we measure the strength of a Prime Minister? In Britain, the person considered as a model Prime Minister was Sir Robert Peel. The strongest Prime Minister was undoubtedly Winston Churchill. The wartime Cabinet was only a shadow of Churchill. Many of the important communications from Churchill to US President Roosevelt was brought before the Cabinet after they were sent. Perhaps no other Prime Minister would have received the kind of cooperation and total support he had received from ministers belonging to different parties, because it is a national government. Churchill got the best of support from his Cabinet and could confidently assert, "I am easily satisfied with the very best." The great constitutional expert Ivor Jennings had said that with strong support from the party and full confidence of the leaders, a Prime Minister could wield even more powers than the Roman emperors. That is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is what he wants himself to be.
Thank you for being with us.
Radio Express.
To receive Radio Express English news and English programs in your WhatsApp, please send a WhatsApp message English programs to 90727 95547 and please subscribe to our YouTube channel Radio Express. Thank you.